Alright guys, it is the time you've all been waiting for, the engine rebuild and assembly. So this time I can show you every detail that you want, or at least every detail that I remember and can get on camera in a way that's worth sharing. So now that we are not on a tight timeline and I don't have any, have to worry about anybody's privacy or anything like that, I can show you guys every nitty-gritty detail that you want. And when you wonder why these videos are long and there are multiple of them, remember, you asked for it. So, where we're at, we're basically in the exact same situation that we were in the last time I did this video. The short block is still assembled. The difference is, rather than everything being brand new like it was, everything is really well used. It's just still in good enough shape that I don't feel the need to refresh it. Everything was spec'd exactly as it should. I was not able to detect any change in the clearances and tolerances that were on the build sheet from Tim. So the short block is good. I'm fairly confident that we don't have to worry about anything with the short block. So we're just gonna go ahead and reassemble everything with the upgraded oil pan, pickup tube, doing some new oil related stuff. And then of course we did a bunch of work on the heads again, just to refresh those and kind of check things over. So this is gonna be basically the same thing I did last time, but more detail. All right, so before we get started, flip it over and start putting things together, a couple things I want to point out and I want to talk about real quick. One being, I went ahead and I upgraded the block that I was using for my remote oil filter adapter block, I think is what it's called. I never get the name right, but that's what it is, if you know what you're looking for. One, I was using the MMR piece before. That was 10 AN size. This is 12, this Ford one. And the MMR one, I would have to do major modifications to make it fit. So I decided to upgrade to this Ford Performance one. I'm going to say upgrade in quotations because I actually ended up having to do a little machining to the block to get it to match the holes on the actual block. You'd think that since they're both made by Ford that those would match up perfectly, but they didn't. The other thing is every car that Ford makes, with the exception, I can't say for sure on the GT500 because I just don't know, but all the GTs in previous, Mustang GT models and Coyotes and stuff use a much smaller oil pressure sensor. And this one doesn't work with normal bolts. So I found out that, because it's too wide and it hits on the bolts when you're going in. So I found out I found some ARP bolts that managed to work, but just barely. And I should point out that I can't get this off without taking the pressure sensor off, which when all this is in the car, it's gonna be a huge bitch. So hopefully I never have to take that off ever again. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do here is, because the heads are mostly assembled, they have the valves and the retainers and all that kind of stuff, so they're all ready to go and just drop straight on. So we're going to go ahead and prep the block here to accept the heads. So we're going to go clean this surface off just one last time, get all the last little bit. Then we're going to put the head studs in, then the head gaskets in, and then we're going to go ahead and drop the heads on and tighten everything down. And then we'll get ready, start with the camshaft and the timing and all that kind of good stuff. All right, so gonna go ahead and install the head studs now that we got the surface prepped. So important to keep in mind all the torque values are for head studs are set with using the moly lube here, the ARP lube, on every threaded surface. So that includes the threads that go down into the block, and then again on the threads and the nuts and the washers that you actually tighten down when the heads are installed. Then for torque, you don't want to there isn't a torque setting for this, you just want to get them all snug. The only thing is when you're using moly lube, you need to give it time. Go back and recheck the snugness just in case you squished any of the moly lube down at the bottom. Here, you can hear that. So make sure you come back and you give these some time. Don't just immediately assume. So for example, yep, got a little bit more out of that. All right, and then once you got all your studs in, go ahead and put your head gasket on. Make sure you get everything to line up correctly. Want to make sure that obviously the ends here are lining up where they're supposed to, and you got good clearances. All right, that slid right on. Some will tell you to put the head studs in after the you put the head on. Up to you, in my experience, which is admittedly limited. As long as you're not an idiot and you don't just try to Hulk smash it on there, you won't even really touch the threads. You know, there's enough clearance and things slide right on. So up to you. The proper way technically is to utilize those dowels and make sure everything lines up that way. But another way to do it, pop it right down. Then once you've done that, we want to go ahead and coat all the threads and all the surfaces that things will mate up against. So we'll get here, and then we'll get that surface there. I'll tell you one thing about German Shepherds. They never stop staring. It's kind of creepy. All right, now that we got everything ready, I'm gonna sink these down in the same order that'll torque them. Then we're gonna go ahead and torque these down. So with these ARP studs, it's 35 pounds, no, 30 pounds, 75 pounds, then 100 pounds. All right, and then once you're done torquing everything, I always go ahead and go through it and mark the bolts and nuts and all that good stuff that I've torqued. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a fresh paint marker on every stud that I've torqued. And then that way, before you close things up, you can just go back and check and see if you put your paint marker on there. And if you forget you put a paint marker on there, then I just go ahead and every time I see a bolt that doesn't have a nice good paint marker on there, I just go ahead and re-torque it just to check. All right, now that we got the head studs in and everything's nice and tight down there, our next thing is going to be to put in the hydraulic lash adjusters / lifters and the rockers. So to do that, you want to soak both in oil and coat everything in oil. These don't get assembly lube. That'll go here. You'll use assembly lube for the cam journals and stuff. But specifically for the lifters and stuff, it calls for actual, just standard oil. So I have mine soaking in oil right now. So that way when I pull them out and I drop them in all the holes here, they'll be nice and coated in oil. Same with the rockers. Then we'll go ahead and drop the cams in and tighten everything down there. Roll the other side over, put that, do the same thing over there, and then we can go ahead to the front of the engine and start working on the timing stuff, oil pump, all that good stuff. So just to give you an idea, I just got a little container here. All my lash adjusters, lifters are just sitting in there soaking in oil. Just take them out one by one, shove them in their little holes. This is obviously important, and then the second part you're going to do to help make sure that you don't have any metal on metal friction or anything bad there is you're going to prime the engine before you start it the first time. With a Coyote like this or any of these modern engines, modern meaning modern Ford engines, you cannot prime them by just turning them over or turning the crank or turning the oil pump with a cordless drill. The only way to do it is to actually pump oil into the system. So depending on what you have available, I use an AccuSump. So I have an AccuSump that holds 3 quarts of oil. That's when the car's off, is pressurized with at 80-90 pounds of pressure. So I can also use that as a oil primer, if you will, by filling it up with 3 quarts of oil, pressurizing the cylinder, opening it, and it dumps 3 quarts of oil into the system, which pressurizes the applies oil pressure to everything. That way, when I start it the first time, everything's got oil pressure and we're good to go. Unfortunately, these guys don't have the little clip. I shouldn't say unfortunately, because supposedly that's a reliability thing, but by not having the clip, they're not as easy to ensure they're on securely. And I found when I was rebuilding the engine the first time, they do tend to fall off. So make sure before you officially, final torque all your cap bolts for the cams that you verify none of these has slipped off, because that'll be a bad day. All right, now that we got all the rockers and the hydraulic lash adjusters in, it's gonna be time to go ahead and lube up the camshafts and drop them in. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the intake side just because it's further away, and that's the way I like working. So we're gonna go intake, then exhaust, then put all the caps in and tighten everything down. Aha! Remember what I was telling you guys? All right, and then at least for me, this is matching what the engine came out apart the first time, but it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the cap numbers. So you can see here, this is number 8. So number 8 will go here. All right, and then just like before, all surfaces need to be coated. So I'm going to coat these guys here. All right, one thing I should mention before I go tighten down the bolts, you want to make sure that you align, one, we're starting with the left-hand side. 2, you want to make sure these D-rings on the end of your camshafts are pointing straight up, and that your keyway here is clocked at 1230. This will make sure that as you tighten everything down, no matter where everything is, you're not smashing, pistons, valves into pistons and all that kind of good stuff. So this ensures everything's in the right spot, you're not hurting anything, and you can, get everything lined up correctly for timing. All right, and then once you're ready to torque it down, 90 inch-pounds. All right, now that we got everything torqued down and we're good to go here, I'm gonna roll this over and go ahead and put the cams into the other side. I'm gonna do that off camera just so I can move a little bit quicker. I'll pick up with you right after I've finished over there. All right, so one of the things I forgot to do before I put the heads on, not that it's out of order and it doesn't really matter, so I'm not worried about it, but forgot to go ahead and put the oil pump on. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. Make sure to put some oil into the oil pump, turn it by hand, just get some lubrication in there. All right. All right, and then for torque, we're gonna do 89 on this guy, 89 inch-pounds. Okay, we're gonna do 18 foot-pounds. On this guy. Back to 89 foot-pounds here. Last up is 177 inch-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that gets that exactly. That translates to 14.7 foot-pounds, so I've put this guy just under 15. Okay. All right, so I forgot to turn the camera back on, but after you do 89 inch-pounds, 18 foot-pounds, 89 inch-pounds, 14.7 foot-pounds, you do 45 degrees of turn, 75 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, and then you're good to go. So now that we have that done, we can go ahead and put the VCT phasers on. All right, so when you're going ahead to put the phasers on, to line up where appropriately the secondary chains are supposed to be, so you're going to have, when you flip them over, so that you're going to be, upside down, if you will, the intake phaser with the mark facing up, it's the one with only one sprocket. With the intake phaser, or then with the exhaust phaser, the one with two sprockets, the mark facing down, have one chain or one blue link on the exhaust, the two blue links here on the intake. So then we're going to take this and we're going to hopefully not mess it up, but then flip it around like this. And go put it on. Okay, there we go. All right. So as I was saying, what I remembered last time is there's no way you're going to get both of these camshafts lined perfectly up for this to slide right over so easily. So I know MMR is a very controversial brand and many folks have very strong feelings either way. This is a very handy little wrench they make. Based on my experience doing this last time without it, it's worth the money. I would just get it. It allows you to slip over the camshaft here and very easily manipulate it to make it work for you and make getting these on there much easier. All right, and then once you have those on, if you're using ARP, torque to 33 foot-pounds. All right, now that we got the sprockets on, or the VCT phasers on, and we're ready to move over to the other side, first thing we got to do is we have to get the timing chain and all its components on so that we can then rotate the keyway to, I believe it's like 930. So that way when we put these camshafts on, they're not hitting any valves. So the way this works is you're going to take your bronze link here and you're going to put it on, there's a little mark here. It's really hard to show you guys. But on your crank gear here, there's a little mark. So you're going to want to put the gold on that. One off. Okay, there we go. And that should allow us to line up the blue one up here. with the L marker on our cam sprocket, our exhaust VCT sprocket here. So you can see here, if you look closely, there's an L with a blue on the blue there, and then the keyway here, or the little marker, I should say, on our billet sprocket here is on the bronze. So now we can go ahead and put in our timing. So to time this up, you're essentially going to be making sure that your camshaft, see that little marker there with the L next to it? You want to be, perpendicular with the head here, or in line, I guess. I don't know how to describe this. In line, so it's pointing straight up from, where the pistons are moving up and down from the bores. And then over here, you're going to want to have your keyway here at roughly 1230, 1231, somewhere in there. And the big thing is it's going to not show up on camera well, but there's a little, I think I got it there. See that little black mark? You're going to want to make sure that one part of your link on your chain is there, and the other one is on that mark at the top of the sprocket here. As long as those are lining up correctly, when you go to put tension on the chain, you'll be in time, and then we'll be ready to rotate the crank and get it ready for the right side heads. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down, put my locking, or put my bolt in here to, once we got our chain guide and our tensioner guide up on here, we can go ahead and tighten everything down. So both sets of bolts here, the one that holds the chain guide down, 89 inch-pounds. And then I'm using brand new tensioners here, so unfortunately I can't show you exactly how it works. But essentially, if you pull these off your motor and you're not working with brand new ones, this will be out and you will need to engage this little locking mechanism here to enable them, or to hold this down so you can go ahead and install it on the motor. To do that, you essentially put a small flathead screwdriver in here and you push this backwards, this little stopper here, you push it backwards, basically disengage the teeth. That allows you to push it and this all the way down, which, by the way, you'd put in a vise to clamp this down. And then you would just stick, this, if you still have one of these because you bought a kit, or honestly like a paper clip or something like that down here to engage the stopper. So there are tons of videos on YouTube on how to do this. Just search, suppressing or compressing coyote chain guide. It'll come up for you. And just like the lower chain guide here, the tensioner is held on by these two bolts, torqued to 89 inch-pounds. There's one. There's two. And then just pull this safety out. And it will pop loose and push down on the tensioner, and then you're good to go on this side. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate the keyway back over so that we can go ahead and put our camshafts on the right hand side in. All right, so we got the keyway here at 930. Just a reminder, if you're following along and you're working with a cross plane crank motor, you'll be dealing with different positions here on the crankshaft. This is specifically for the flat plane. But now that I got that at 930, I'm good to go ahead and put the camshafts here on the right hand side. I'm going to go ahead and skip this part on video of installing the camshafts because it's identical to what I did over there. Once I get to the point where it comes time to put the chain on, I'll pick the camera back up just to show you the final bits and pieces of, putting the timing chain on, all that kind of good stuff. But, more or less, we're about ready to rock and roll here, and things should start moving forward pretty quickly. Hey guys, one thing I forgot that I wanted to show you real quick. So while the D-rings or the keyways on the end of the camshafts face, up over here, on this side they do have unique areas they're supposed to, or independently unique and different from over there. So the D-ring, or the little indicator here is supposed to face basically essentially like this. It could probably get turned a little bit more, but more or less this general direction. And then this one is a much shallower turn. So this one you can pretty much draw a straight line from the indicator here over to the this plug here. So I'm gonna go ahead, or one thing I should also mention, you don't have to worry about getting them absolutely perfect, because when you go to put the VCT phasers on the end, remember, as long as they're lined up correctly using the chain, when you go to put them on here, you obviously won't be able to get them fully on unless these are both in the right area relative to each other. So you might have to finesse and maybe move this one, twist it a little bit more, something like that. But more other than that, it's the same process. So just make sure that if you're doing this yourself and you're not looking at a diagram, you know, you're following the positioning of these two keyways here, D-rings, whatever they're called. I'm drawing a total blank. All right, one more thing I forgot. At least I'm remembering to catch it and record it. But on this guide, instead of being down here and up here, it is going to be on each side. So timing mark facing to the right, timing mark facing to the left. The exhaust phaser, the one with 2 sprockets, is going to be on your right because you're going to flip it, rotate it. So just a reminder, make sure you align this way. And then once you flip it over like this, you're going to rotate a little bit so that the, I don't know if that's going to show up for you, but there's a little mark with an R next to it for right. That's going to be facing 12 o'clock here. Which is actually, it feels like quite a bit, so don't be scared. You will need to brace the camshafts to keep them from moving. All right, so that is gonna do it for us. As you can see here, I did a little bit off camera, but it's exactly the same process and situation that you would be doing on the other side. Or as that you did on the other side. Obviously the difference being everything's that, you know, going this way rather than that way, but you're still lining up one of the links down here with that little black marker on the gear there, the crank gear, and then you're lining up the other one here with the little marker up here. The difference is, the only thing important to keep in mind is that side you're lining up with the L, this side you're lining up with the R. Other than that, it's self-explanatory, same exact thing. And that is how you go ahead and time this motor. And then just to test it, just put something on there and rotate it around. And you'll feel if you got it out of time by even one gear, because you'll get piston to valve contact. So if you're able to get a full rotation out of this, you are good and you managed to do your timing correctly. Alright guys, so that's where I'm going to cap this video. I'm going to do part 2, is going to be the final assembly. Just to kind of recap where we're at, we're going to have to put the oil pan on, make sure everything with the oil pan, you know, the height of the pickup tube and all that kind of stuff is good. Going to go ahead and obviously finish up the stuff here on the front. So put the front engine cover on, put the oil pan on, bolt everything down, tighten everything down, put the valve covers on, all that kind of good stuff. So there's still a little bit more work. Dress the front end, you know, put all the accessory drive stuff on, all that kind of good stuff. So we got another good video coming. Like I said, I'm going to call this one here because that's a good stopping place. All right, guys, so that's going to do it as I mentioned. So hopefully this was helpful or at least entertaining for you. I'm really happy with how this is going together. I have so much more confidence this time knowing that I've done all this before. I'm getting to make some nice little changes and upgrades along the way, and you know, a lot of lessons learned. So I'm having a good time this time, and I'm happy to share in more detail as I've put together this engine a couple of times now, and I know how to do it without breaking it. And you know, the last time when I made this video, the first video, that was the first time I'd ever assembled that engine, and I didn't really want to provide too much detail and lead people down the wrong path. So I'm confident in what I did here will hold together for your track of use if this is what you're going for yourself. If you have any comments, recommendations, improvements, anything like that, as always, please comment below. I'm always happy to learn a new way to do something that's, you know, more effective, safer, whatever. So always happy to help. All right, thanks guys. I'll catch you in part 2.